We used to be so close. I haven't hung out with you in 10 years. How many kids do you think I have?
I don't know how many kids you have.
It's crazy. We need to hang out more. I got 2 kids.
You have 2 children?
Yeah.
When did this happen?
5, like they're 4 and 6. So you do the math
4
on.
and 6 years ago. That's
crazy. Yeah.
That's amazing. Guys, his math is not good.
Yeah, I know, man.
I have a dog. I didn't make it, but we rescued it.
Counts.
So that was pretty good. Yeah.
So then, you're trying to get away from food, which is so funny. Right before I started working here, I interviewed at Xerox, and I had the same thing where the guy was like, "Okay, yeah, like, why do you want this job?" And I was like, "I don't know."
I don't know.
Be like a Xerox salesman. But then it's interesting that our lives intertwined again, because I remember I was in the basement at Bruno's, like dingy basement at this grocery store.
He's online.
And you told me, you were like, I applied at this advertising school. And I was like, I applied at this advertising school. And we randomly worked together for 8 years, didn't even know each applied, got into Humber at the same time.
But in different classes.
Yeah.
It was like the A class and the B class. And there was like the Montagues and Capulets, basically.
Was you A or B?
I think I was A. Not that A is better than B.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, clearly it worked out better for you than me. But it was like you never got to, you only saw them in like the halls as you were like, oh, there's the other class.
But there was the wild thing about who it worked out for. It was like, I remember 2 or 3 months in, there was an assignment, and they put everyone's, basically a competition amongst all the students.
I know where this is going.
I still remember it. I did not understand what an ad was. We had to do print ads, and I could, like, if I showed you what I produced and entered, it's not an ad. It just didn't make sense. There was like 3 headlines. There was tons of small copy. There was multiple images. And your thing, and they like ranked them, and yours was the top. I still remember, do you remember the ad I'm going to say?
It was Rush Hour.
Yeah, it was for like provincial parks, and it was just a beautiful one photo of a family on like a whitewater raft and just a giant headline that said Rush Hour. And it was for provincial parks, and I was like, holy shit, that's an ad. And like you...
I had a heads up. Or an advance, because my dad worked in advertising. He was He was a graphic designer and an art director for years. He actually, before that, he was a typographer. That's how
in Toronto.
In Toronto, yeah. He worked for Les Usherwood, who was like the godfather of typography.
There's a Les Usherwood award at one of the big award shows.
Based on the same person.
Oh,
yeah.
What are the odds?
That's how that came from. So I actually grew up in ad agencies as a kid. I used to spend a lot of time at TBWA when they were on at the Water. He worked at for a while. Where else was he? Sharp Blackmore for years.
Oh, no way.
I spent a lot of time at ad. In fact, one time he came, we were like, somehow I managed my way into like a room. A lot of people, they were testing like a bunch of commercials, and I was guessing the products before like the reveal.
Yeah.
And my dad comes into the room. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm working here, man. Come on." Like, but I spent a lot of time. I probably spent more time in ad agencies than butcher shops until the switch. Yeah.
I never knew that. Okay. And so I was going to say that first job, Snow Angels, did that give you the inkling to like get into something creative, or opposite? You were like already in the creative space, and that's why you were like, "Oh, I'm going to create this thing, Snow Angels."
Well, I mean, I was 13, so I don't think I was thinking anything other than like, I need money for gum, like that's really it. And I think there was always like an inclination to want to be entrepreneurial. I think if you are an entrepreneur, it starts at probably a very young age. I don't know too many people that like at 72 are like, you know what? Yeah. Let's try this for a change. So I think like I always wanted to do my own thing. I think that's also maybe why I got frustrated with jobs, because I just didn't really connect with the work. I was good at it. I went to work every day. I did my job, but I personally had a lot of like career anxiety at a very young age. Like I felt like the person who I was going home needed to still be that same person going to work, and I wasn't finding that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I quit to sell sandwiches off of a table.
Yeah, so let's talk about the sandwiches off the table. I think I was there the first time.
You were.
You sold them on Tecumseh or Niagara? Or
you nailed it.
Tecumseh?
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember Yeah, it was under the Fidel Gastro brand.
Yeah, so the way it
Selling
started,
sliders?
it was sandwiches.
Little ones? They were
little
little.
ones.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all, I don't even remember. They were buns. And I remember, like, the original idea was to open up a sandwich shop. Like, that's what I had been working on for about a year while I was still working my other job. And so I'd put a business plan together. I'd come up with a name. I'd come up with the branding for it, the menu and the sales plan and the real estate plan. So I had really thought this through. And it was like an 80-page book that I had. And then I would start doing tastings for friends. And everyone was like, they'd hear the idea and they're like, this is what you should be doing. You feed people all the time. Well, anyways, like, you know, yeah, you're not a chef, but you should probably go down this road with your career. And then I was like, great, you know. So I got a meeting at the bank, and I was pretty confident going in there. And I think they rejected me in like 45 seconds. They were like, you have no money, you have no experience, you have no equity, you have no capital. They're like, if you can get your parents to put their house up as collateral, we'll give you the money. And I was like, that seems a little harsh. You know? So I asked my mom. No, I'm kidding. So and what's funny is, how do I say? I don't mean this in a bad way. I came from a creative department where I was used to my ideas getting thrown out. So I was like, it felt very reminiscent of that, where I was like, here's another person taking my idea that I think is going to be really good and telling me I can't do it. And I walked away from it, and I was like, I'm never going to sell sandwiches. I'm going to just go back to my job. And then I was at a party one night, and there was it was like a lot of musicians, like local Juno award-winning musicians at the party, and someone was going to order food. And then instead of ordering food, they saw me and they knew that I liked to cook, and they were like, yo, Basile, what if we give you the money and you cook? And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, whatever. I'm half in the bag. I'll get on the stove and figure something out. And what was interesting about this party was like there was like a DJ booth there, and people were like breakdancing, and like there was a bar, like it was quite lively. And then all of a sudden, the attention from all these areas redirected to the kitchen, and it was an open concept kitchen, and people were watching me cook food for them. So I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Maybe there's an idea that I can launch this concept without a bricks and mortar attachment. And so I went home literally that night and rewrote the entire business plan around the concept of like having dinner with Fidel Gastros. Like that was, because the concept to open the sandwich shop was Fidel Gastros. And then I was like, okay, well, there's no more place, but there's got to be a thing that people come do. And I guess at the exact same time, this is how our worlds connect again for a third time. The Toronto Underground Market had launched, and that's where I met Andrew from La Carnita. And we were both doing pop-ups at the same time. We were doing them in very different ways. You know, his was to, like, it was like buy art, get a taco. Mine was buy a sandwich so I can, like, pay for gas. Like, it was like, but happening all at the same time. And it was unreal. When we did the first event, I wasn't sure what to expect. And then our first two customers that night were cops. They showed up, and I'm like, oh man, we're gonna get shut down. Like, I have no insurance. I don't have a permit. I don't have a business license. Like, and they were like, oh, we're here to buy sandwiches. I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, we read about it in the paper. I'm like, I'm sorry, you did what? So I guess it was also an opportunity to take everything I learned in advertising about, you know, developing a brand, believing in it, pitching it to people, and just trying to get the message out as many different ways as possible. Like, if you had ears, you knew that I was selling sandwiches downtown that day. Like, I told everybody. I would go to washrooms in public places and put like little invites on all the stalls. Like, I went everywhere. And then 400 people showed up to the first one. And then the Toronto Underground Market happened, and things just started to very quickly snowball, got a lot of press out of it. And then one day I get an email saying, maybe you should have your own TV show. And then that happened. And then I got a food truck, and then I opened a restaurant. And I was like, okay, what's going on? You know, a year ago, I get emotional talking about it sometimes because it's like, it all happened very quickly. And I think if I could go back and redo it, I would have taken a lot more, you know, methodical time in between growth. Mm-hmm. But at 24, 25, you're just like, And that's actually, like, if you met me then, that's how I walked around. I was just like, gotta make sandwiches, gotta go. And it was, things were just always happening. Like I said, there was a food truck, and then there was a camera crew around, and then I launched a restaurant. And like, I'd never had staff before. I had no money. I don't know how I was paying for these things, but we were busy, so that worked. But I wasn't doing anything like well, if that makes sense. Like, I was doing a lot of things, and I was developing a name for myself for being that guy who just does a lot of like, wow, he's working really hard. And I think, but again, if I were to go back in time, I would have dialed into the craft a little bit more and done a better job of perfecting things before moving on to the next.
Gotcha. Out of those specific lanes you talked about, like TV show, restaurant, food truck, books.
All happened in a year.
Yeah,
like,
I remember
literally
watching
1 year.
It's crazy. Is there any of those one specific things where you would love to go back and let breathe more so than the others?
Yeah, so I think the TV show is an interesting one because I feel like I've always said to, like, I'm still very good friends with the production people that were behind the show, and I was like, I wish we were doing the show today.
Gotcha.
Like, this version of me was doing that show today, but it wouldn't have worked because the whole idea was about this guy losing his mind running a food truck. But you forget, like, yeah, it was a reality TV show, but it was actually my reality. Like, so if I was freaking out about a generator not working, there it was on TV, and my friends and family are watching this, and I'm losing my mind. And so I think, like, I would have been a little bit more receptive to the fact that there was a camera there
Gotcha.
all the time watching me, because then you have to, like, then I actually came out with a YouTube series afterwards where I rewatched every episode in shame. And I think that actually, like, it was good because it was like a watch along of my own life. And there were moments where I called myself out for being an absolute asshole and being unfair and a horrible person to work for. And I think that was a bit of a restart as an entrepreneur, because it was an opportunity to be like, listen, I wasn't perfect, but you have to understand, like, I was on, when I say no sleep, I mean no sleep.
Yeah.
I was working all the time. I had 1,000 things happening simultaneously, and I just wasn't really professional at any of them. I was just trying to keep them alive and going. Plus, on top of it, I had a camera in my face. So I think if you put anyone in that circumstance, they're not going to always look the best.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I can't even, like, listen to my voice on, like, these videos. I won't watch them. So I can't believe you watched.
I will watch and I'll play it back to you over the phone.
Was it, like, surprising? Were you like, I don't even remember that? Like, it's a different perspective on yourself? Or was it like, no, I know what I'm getting into?
I had no idea what I was getting into. I remember they were like, we're going to pay you $1,000 an episode. I'm like, oh my God, I'm rich. Like, this is great. Meanwhile, you don't realize how many hours go into one episode of TV. And then, season 2 of the show was even harder, but I learned a lot at the same time. But season 2 of the show was harder because it was called Rebel Without a Kitchen, but now I had opened a restaurant, so I had a kitchen. So, like, there was a flaw in the logic. So they were like, okay, well, what if Matt travels and, like, goes to different cities and he does the same thing, but now in another city? The problem with that was it now took me away from a brand new restaurant I had just opened. So I would, like, go film for 2 weeks, and, we would do some great fun TV, and then I'd come back and I'd have to, like, fix all the problems that were happening while I was gone. And this was, like, on and off for a few months at really pivotal times for restaurants, like the first 6 months of opening, where anyone will tell you the first year can kill you. So if you don't really dial into it, and I think that's where I knew I needed to take the actual restaurant part of the journey a lot more seriously. Even though it wasn't my quote-unquote dream to open a restaurant, I just did it, which I did it like literally, I was like, you know what? Restaurant. And that was it. Like, at that point, I was like, no, this needs a lot more care and time and professionalism to see it succeed. So that's when we kind of put a lot more energy into the restaurant, and we kind of became a brunch spot.
Yeah, I remember.
That was the best part.
Someone I think Jacqueline referenced your pad thai fries.
Pad thai fries.
Legendary.
It's the only thing actually people still say to me all the time. They're like, "Hey man, I really miss pad thai. I'll die, and that'll be the thing I'm remembered for is pad thai fries."
I mean, that's a good thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
There's worse things to be remembered for. And if I could do it all over again with the restaurant, I would have just had a brunch spot, like just 7 days a week brunch, close at 4 o'clock,
right?
Come back at 7 in the morning. I get really sleepy at 6, 7 o'clock. So,
but if you had to do it again, would you?
Would I open my own restaurant again? Yeah. Listen, that led to a lot more opportunities. So if I knew, again, where I was going, I would say yes. But if I were to be like, Matt, here's an opportunity to reopen your own restaurant right now today, I'd be like, yeah. Okay. No, we won't be doing that one. But I consult for a lot of restaurants now.
Oh, gotcha. In Toronto or abroad? Or
everywhere. Yeah, like I'm doing one right now. I can't say the name of the place, but they have like 26 locations. And I'm redoing all their food
menu. Is it mostly on menu stuff, or it's everything?
It's usually the menu stuff. Yeah. That's where I usually do 2 things, maybe 3 things, but usually 2 things. It's recreating an entire menu based on a brand vision that they have. Sometimes I help them build the brand vision, or at least I give them my feedback on where they're going and what direction to take. But then I also help with building like kitchen culture and teams, because that's something that needs a lot of work on in the industry as a whole. But the first thing I usually tell my clients is don't open a restaurant or don't do this. Like, right. Not because I have ill will towards it. It's just I don't think anyone, myself included, realize what goes into actually. Anyone can open. I feel like Jerry Seinfeld. Anyone can take a reservation. Yeah. Anyone can open a restaurant. Yeah. But it takes a lot of patience and determination to see it through for a long time. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the goal with this restaurant? Is it to run the same restaurant for 7 or 8 years? Is it to franchise? Is it to reimagine what that restaurant looks like over time? I remember like we were in multiple conversations with multiple companies about franchising Lisa Marie's. And then we were like, well, how does that work? Like sometimes the special is just like what I thought of today on my drive in, you know? So it was, we used to call it a restaurant with the heart of a pop-up, because it really was an opportunity for me to, it was a very expensive opportunity, but an opportunity for me to really develop my craft and figure out where my position was as a quote-unquote chef in Toronto.
Gotcha. Okay, before we zoom out and talk just creativity in general, the last thing on your journey is Alchemy Grills. Why don't you talk me through that? I mean, I follow you on Instagram, so I know what's up, but how would you introduce people to what it is?
Yeah, so because of COVID and all of its wacky kind of ups and downs for hospitality, I was kind of done with that chapter, but at the same time, I was approached to start a new chapter. And it was just an idea at the time. So Alchemy Grills is a company I helped co-found, which is the world's only simultaneous live fire smoker and grill. So you can smoke and grill all at the same time, but it's all powered by wood and charcoal. It's a very immersive cooking experience. It's meant for people who really enjoy spending time outdoors cooking for people. And as a co-founder but chef and like ambassador for the company, it's really tapped into what I do best. And I think it's the job or the role that I was always meant to do, but I needed to do all that other crazy shit first to then figure out how to do this part. Because it's taken all of my experience and background in food and advertising and entrepreneurialism and you know, guiding people's directions, because it's such a new thing. Like I get to, as a chef, I get to work with engineers and help them understand like how their knowledge base can build a thing better for people to cook, you know, in their backyards. It's, you know, I've learned so much about manufacturing that I never thought I would ever need to know about manufacturing. But when we built them, they're actually made overseas in Guangzhou, China. So I went there for 6 weeks and I oversaw the entire manufacturing process. But when I got there, they have like these QC teams. So they had like a prototype, a third prototype. So I'd already tested 2. And now they're like, before we go into mass manufacturing, there's going to be 1 more prototype that I could test. And they thought I was just going to like go in with like a checks and balances, kind of like, yeah, you know, move this and shift that. And I was like, all right, let's fire it up. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, like I flew 16 hours. I should probably cook on it like a lot, because you need to test things that are being cooked for 12 hours and 12 minutes and everything in between, hot, low. Like, I'm like, we need to test it all. So I went to the market, grabbed a bunch of meat and a bunch of seafood, and I had them move it up to the roof of the building, and I fired it up, and well, then you like have all this food. So I started feeding everyone that worked there, and they're like, we've never seen a white guy cook for us before. Like, this is the wildest thing in the land. And I'm like, what else would you do, right? Like, so then the next day, they're like, what do you want to do today? I'm like, fire it up again. Like, so, because you have to like compress hours into, especially like, they're like, Matt, we need to know like how long of a warranty to give it. I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you do? Well, you cook for as long as you can in as short amount of time as possible. So I cooked on it for 4 days straight, fed people for 4 days straight. And keep in mind, there's very little like actual communication happening back and forth because
just food.
Yeah, through food, right? And then, so now fast forward 2 weeks into production, we hit 2 massive obstacles in manufacturing. One of them was like this knob piece that cracked, and the other was like the walls on the inside of the smoker where the metal was so thin they ripped every time the press stamp was removed. And they're looking at me for solutions. I'm like, I have a grade 10 math. Like, I don't know, guys. Like, use a thicker metal, or maybe put a knee brace on the actual thing that you crank. Like, I don't have proper terminology for this stuff. And I think we're at, like, you know, I had to postpone my flight home. I'm stressed out because I have a team here that's freaking out. I'm over there, I'm freaking out, you know, and then everyone just stopped working on everything else in the company, and the entire company came together to build these barbecues because they were like, this guy was on the roof cooking for us for 4 days, and now the bolts are breaking. Like, we need to figure this out. And it was probably like the best thing ever. So I'm a big believer in, someone actually just the other day asked me like, what's your business style? I was like, hospitality. Because once you are kind of carved in hospitality, you never lose that skill set. And it's like, the whole idea is I want you to walk away from this exchange feeling just as positive as me. Like, we should both walk away feeling like this was a good experience. And I try to bring that to everything I do now, and it really helped in the manufacturing space. So it's been a wild ride. And now we're in retail since May, long weekend. But we do like curated dinners to kind of help market the product because we don't have much of a budget. And we're in 9 stores across the country. We just locked in another 8 for next year. We're building a smaller unit. We're building a pizza oven attachment. We're building a rotisserie attachment. So there's a lot happening.
Amazing. Yeah, man, I love following along. Always good content.
All
and
the
inspiration.
ASMR stuff, right? Yeah. I'm big into like ASMR videos for it because the whole idea there was like, actually Dave and I were just talking about that a couple of weeks ago. I was like, I want people to feel the grill even though they're not there. It's like through a screen. And it's like, well, I don't have a whole lot of money production dollars, so it's just like phone and that's it. And it works really well.
Yeah. I also love that hospitality note, which I know another entrepreneur who puts a lot of sort of emphasis on hospitality in any realm, like applying those principles to anywhere in life. But so let's talk about creativity in general. Hospitality is a theme. I also see, again, from knowing you, but also just consuming your content, like being disruptive and different seems to be like core to who you are. Is that something that's like deeply rooted in your DNA? Or is it more like something you have to remind yourself of? Like, if someone throws you an offer, do you have to be like, is this different enough?
I think you nailed it. It's both those things, right?
Okay.
So I think always be different was actually my personal mantra for how I approached everything in restaurants, but just as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I'd look at an idea, I'd be like, it's a good idea, but is it like a good idea because everyone thinks it's a good idea, or is it a good idea because it's different, that it'll make sense in 3 or 4 months from now? And I think trying to look ahead to trends and looking ahead at how you develop a product, you have to have this like gut intuition and just believe in it and go with it. And I think being different in how I approach every project has been kind of my, I don't want to say superpower, but it's been a strength that I lean into because I wasn't classically trained. So I had to use this point of difference to make noise. And it's benefited me, I think.
Okay. Any tips for like people here who cook at home in coming up with a new dish? Or is that something that's just, again, rooted in your DNA, or do you have any sort of process?
it's a good question. I think don't try and put a triangle into a square. I think a lot of time, and I did this a lot as a chef, like, be like, I'm gonna take like pad thai fries, like I'm gonna take French fries and make them taste like pad thai. But I think it's like, it should just feel right, and it's gotta be tasty. Like, so that should always be the driving factor, is this taste good. But then when you're applying like a business case to it, be like, okay, what's the longevity of this? Is this something that's gonna be out of trend in a week? Like, if you were to be like, Matt, I have a great cupcake recipe, I'd be like, just make it for yourself. Like, don't spend money on trying to make a cupcake place right now, because cupcakes have already come and gone, you know? So that's another thing that you have to look at, is like the business side of creating food and what that means. And then there's like then the social media aspect of it. Is it something that people are gonna want to actually sit there and watch for a minute and a half, and then actually comment on it and maybe share it with someone else? Because as simple as these requests sound, it's very hard to actually get that from someone.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I got one or two more, and then if anyone has questions, think of them now. Any like general tips for people cooking at home who don't spend their lives cooking? Like, I cook a lot at home, but I'm not great, but I could use any little tips you got.
I think a lot of fresh lemon goes a long way. I think,
I don't use that a lot.
Don't give fresh lemon the respect it deserves on food. I think travel and cooking go hand in hand. I think my continuing education as a chef has been through travel and eating food. So I think I always ask young chefs, like, what would you rather do, eat food or cook food? And they always say cook food. I'm like, you want to eat food, man.
Yeah.
Like, that should be the drive. That should be the driving force to why you want to cook food. It's because you want to eat it after. So if you love to cook, it shouldn't just be to feed yourself. It should be to feed the people you love. It should be even the people you don't love, because maybe that's a way to mend a relationship. You know, whenever we're trying to develop a new business relationship with someone, I feed them, because it's like the best way to like break the ice. And we did that like literally right before I came here today. And I think the power. I go back to my grandfather. Sorry.
Oh, good.
I go back to thinking about my grandfather and, you know, the values around feeding people and what he taught me at such a young age and how it still applies today. And what I think what makes it such valuable information is that it'll never expire. Even if the world changes in 25 years, being able to feed someone will still be incredibly valuable. So I think that's what makes it such a real testament to I think who I am or who I want to be, and it's all because of those early teachings from my grandparents.
Amazing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cry.
No, so good. we got dogs, we got emotions.
Yeah, the dog
we got
did it.
Any questions from the audience, from anyone? About anything?
Any questions about Max and what it was like?
John, who went to high school with Matt?
I went to John. Yeah, high school with John. I try to enjoy it. People are often asking me what I think of things. I'm just like, I'm just here for dinner, you know. I think now that I'm older, I'll be 40 this year, and now I'm actually quite good at turning my brain off when I'm just enjoying something, because that's like we were talking about like the journey and stuff. The irony is I had to sell a restaurant, a food truck, and a catering business so that I could cook more. Like, go figure, right? Like, I cook more now than I did in the 10 years that I had that other company, which is crazy. So, and the reason why I cook is because I love to eat. So if I'm going out to eat, I want to just enjoy that. I try to not make it work at all. And then, and listen, but then the flip side is, if a young chef comes up to me or the owner of that restaurant comes up to me, they're like, I really respect everything you've done. I'd love to work with you. Then I'm happy to turn the work conversation back on. But I'm not going there looking for like, what can I, no, I want to have a good time. And like, people are always amazed when I tell them like where I like to eat. Like, I try and do neighborhood spots or holes in the wall. I love a good diner. Oh, love diners. So yeah, I can easily flip the switch and just stop working now.
Have you hit Dawnland's Diner in the East End?
Sorry, where's the East End?
Dawnlands?
The
Like
East End-
on Dawnlands.
Sorry, it's that way.
Yes.
I have not been, no. I'm sorry.
Just there on the weekends. Very good diner. Rudy knows what's up.
I'll check it out. Take me there.
Done.
Done.
Any
The
other
Tulip's
questions?
gone, right? That was in the East End. It was at Greenwood.
I don't think it's there, but maybe it's there. I don't even know the Tulip.
You don't know the Tulip?
I should know. I'm lame.
David,
Any
help me
other
out here.
questions? Yes, Kylie? What's the next trend? What's
Are you asking because you have a business plan for cupcakes and you're... yeah. Are you familiar with Craig's Cookies? Right? Like, yeah, they're great. Craig is a great guy. He's someone you should bring in here and talk to.
I mean, I love
Because
watching that
he-
rise during the pandemic explode.
He started off. He was an out-of-work actor that sold cookies on a bike, and here he is today. Like,
was
selling-
the first one? Parkdale? Or where was the
Parkdale,
first
yeah.
one? Yeah. Okay.
But so, anyways, the elevated stuffed cookie is pretty popular today. What's in the future? I don't know. I think there's always going to be room for two things that are just made very well. So, like heavy, rich butter baking is going to do really well. Are we talking about baking specific and desserts? Okay. I'm like, oh man, I don't know. There's a lot of pressure. So yeah, I think nostalgia always does really well. So if you can find something from your childhood and make like a from scratch version of it, that'll probably hit really well. Like RetroKit, are you familiar with RetroKit, like the shirts?
No.
You should bring them in too. Come on, I'm giving
God.
just
I need your
lining these up for you.
hookups. I need your hookups.
But like RetroKit built a fashion line based on nostalgia, right? So I think there's something about, if you're, like I said, I'll be 40. Whenever I see something from my youth, I'm like, oh, I got to try that, But then at the end of the day, if it's not good, then someone's going to try it once and then never have it again. And like to make a business out of food, they say you need 4 interactions with somebody. You need to have them there 4 times to be able to convert that into a lifelong, dedicated customer.
David?
That's a really great question. So thank you for that. And also, you're someone I've always looked up to as well. So I just want to say thank you for having me here today. And but change for me allows my brain to keep thinking, because if I'm doing the same thing over and over, like the other day I had to input my receipts for my bookkeeper. I was losing my mind. I had to like stop halfway through, put on some music, come back to it, finish. Like I couldn't do it. And I think maybe that's just my brain, how my brain works. And I think luckily I've found a career path and a personality that allows me to just do what I need to do to feel like I'm working, right? And maybe the way I work isn't how most people can work. And I think that's also totally fair too. But my brain needs to keep like thinking and solving problems. And it's hard to solve a problem if you're doing the same thing on repeat. So that's what motivates me to want to change constantly. But then you don't want to change too much, right? Because then you just look like someone who can't focus on anything. So I think now it's about, I use the term like dialing into the things I'm doing, and I plan on doing alchemy for a while until I'm not. And then, but the goal is, even within that umbrella, it's changing on a weekly basis. So you can have like smaller moments of change that still satisfy what my brain needs to feel like it's progressing without it being drastic, I guess. Like I'm not going to go by like, you know what, insurance tomorrow. Like the day after that, I'm going to be an ambulance driver. Like I think it's got to be like there needs to be a progression, a crescendo almost to where it's leading, and then like the thought of retiring one day actually really excites me. People are like, oh no, you're never gonna. I'm like, no, I would love to just like disappear and fish and cook. I would still cook though, and I think that's probably why I got into food, because I know that if I wasn't working, I would still be into food. So that's probably why I should be doing what I do. But the change is, for me, a necessary progression.
Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I guess, oh man. So I guess I was 24 when I started getting that career anxiety. My biggest fear is that I wasn't going to be, you know what, this is going to sound ridiculous. I was worried that you were going to Google my name and nothing would show up. And that was actually what started like the anxiety around my career. Because I was like, I want to like do things. I want to do things that people remember, whether it's like life-changing or not. Like I want something to be known. So the advice I have for you is if you have that little voice that's telling you you're doing the wrong thing or you need to change things, you should probably listen to it because it might be right. But guess what? If it's not right, you can fail and you can try something else. Because I think so often we worry about failing at things that we don't even try new things. And I think that's probably the biggest obstacle in your way. Isn't the change, it's the fear of failing from what happens if you do change.
Love it. We've done a Labnotes on failure as well.
Have we?
And the power of it.
I've failed a few times.
For sure. You got it.
It was an idea at Yorkdale Mall called French Toasted.
Oh, I didn't know.
No one did. And, it bombed. And I remember being like, why? I remember I did the project. Actually, I did the project right after the first ever June's Eatery.
Gotcha.
So, and for those of you that know, like this is how we've all worked together in the past is through Casey House.
What's your title? You're the executive chef of June's, or what?
I don't know what
executive.
I think I'm just kind of like
the chef,
the coach.
The coach. Okay.
I'm like the moral support and like.
But you, the first time you were like the face of it.
Yeah, the first time was I was like the executive chef of June's Eatery, and I was tasked to train the team and get the actual restaurant part functional and operational, and making sure everyone felt comfortable and creating an environment that was respectful of what the meaning of June's was. And I still work with them today. Like we just did the last June's, and actually they finally listened to me. I said, we should probably do this in June. And they're like, you're right. So now we do June's in June every year.
Always coming up with ideas.
Right? I was like, how did no one suggested this? But yeah, so, but then I remember that after the first June's, I was like, wow, what a rewarding experience this project has been. And like, this is going to forever change how I look at my career and my life and all the things. And then this other project came up for Yorkdale. And I was like, I'm on a high. Let's keep it going. And it was like, I've never had like, wow, this is so great to, oh my God, this is horrible. Like one right after another. But again, did it and failed at it. And then came back again.
Well, we're glad for it, and we don't need French toast in Yorkdale. We need
French
grills.
Toast it's too much gluten.
Yeah. So, man, thank you so much. This was such a treat. Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone. This has been an honor. Thank you. Thank you, Max. Max.
Yeah, buddy. So, see you guys.